I stared at my laptop screen, my hands shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the desk. The coffee next to me had gone cold hours ago, untouched. Outside my office window, the city lights blurred together because I couldn't focus on anything except the words glowing on the screen in front of me. Message sent. 2 words, just 2 simple words that had just destroyed my entire life. My stomach lurched, and for a second I thought I might actually throw up right there on my keyboard, because I had just sent the most personal, vulnerable, completely unprofessional email of my entire career to the one person who should never, ever see it. Judge Catherine Morrison. The woman I'd spent 6 months trying not to think about. The woman whose courtroom I'd walked into every Tuesday and Thursday, forcing myself to breathe normally, to speak clearly, to act like a competent attorney instead of someone whose heart was hammering so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. And I had just sent her an email, confessing everything. My finger hovered over my mouse, desperately clicking refresh on my sent folder like somehow that would undo what I'd done, like the internet would take pity on me and just erase it, make it disappear, let me rewind the last 30 seconds of my life. But no, there it was, sent at 7:47 p.m. to judge.morrisondistrict.court.gov, mail to .judge.morrisondistrict.court.gov, not to Sarah. Not to my best friend who was supposed to receive my pathetic late-night confession about how I'd developed completely inappropriate feelings for a sitting judge. No, I'd sent it directly to the source of all my problems. I read the email again, my horror growing with each line. God, what had I been thinking? I'd written everything. How I noticed the way she adjusted her reading glasses before making a ruling. How her voice dropped half an octave when she was about to sustain an objection. How in the final hearing, when she looked at me while I was giving my closing argument, something in her eyes had made me forget my next sentence for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds of dead silence while I stood there like an idiot, drowning in green eyes that seemed to see right through me. I'd written about how I'd gone home that night and couldn't stop replaying that moment. How I'd convinced myself I was imagining things because there was no way, absolutely no way, that someone like Catherine Morrison would ever look at someone like me that way. And then I'd written the worst part, the part that made my face burn even now, alone in my office at almost 8 at night. I'd written about how the case had finally ended 2 weeks ago, how I'd won, how I should be celebrating. But instead, I was miserable because I'd never see her again. Because whatever that thing was between us, whatever tension I'd felt crackling in the air every time we were in the same room, it was over, before it could even begin. I'd written that I didn't know what to do with all these feelings I'd been shoving down for 6 months, that I'd spent so much energy being professional, being perfect, never letting my mask slip for even a second. And now that I could finally admit it to someone, it felt like screaming into a void, because none of it mattered anymore. Jesus Christ, I whispered, dropping my head into my hands. What have I done? My phone sat on the desk next to my laptop, silent, accusing. Any second now it would ring, or she'd email back, something formal and cold. Ms. Torres, your communication was highly inappropriate. I'll be reporting this to the Bar Association. Or worse. She wouldn't respond at all. She'd just forward it to someone else. Someone who would make sure I understood just how badly I'd crossed a line. I grabbed my phone, my thumb hovering over Sarah's contact. I needed to call her. Needed to hear her tell me it wasn't that bad, even though we both knew it was exactly that bad. But what would I even say? Hey, remember that crush I told you about? The judge I've been obsessing over? Well, I just accidentally confessed everything to her instead of you. Career over. Life over. Please come help me pack up my office. The phone slipped from my hand back onto the desk. I pulled up the email one more time, reading it with fresh eyes, trying to see it the way she would see it. A young attorney, barely 32, sending a rambling confession to a respected judge who was probably, 40? 42? Old enough to have the kind of gravitas that made everyone in the courtroom sit up straighter when she walked in. During the Henderson case, I'd written, I had to prep twice as hard for every hearing because I knew I'd see you, because I knew I needed to be absolutely perfect, because any mistake would be 1,000 times worse when you were watching. God, I'd actually written that, when you were watching, like I was some teenager with a crush instead of a professional with a reputation to protect. The worst part? It was all true. Every word. I had spent 6 months preparing obsessively for that case, going over every detail until 2 a.m, not because it was particularly complex, but because I couldn't walk into that courtroom anything less than flawless, not when she was there. I stood up, pacing the length of my small office. 5 steps to the window, 5 steps back to the door. The building was mostly empty now, just the hum of the cleaning crew's vacuum somewhere down the hall. Everyone else had gone home to their normal lives, their normal relationships, their normal problems. And here I was, having just imploded my career because I couldn't keep my feelings to myself. My laptop pinged. New email. I froze mid-step, staring at the screen from across the room like it might explode. For a long moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because whatever was in that email, whatever she'd written back, would determine everything about what came next. Slowly, like I was approaching something dangerous, I walked back to my desk, sat down. The email sat there in my inbox, bold and unread. From judge.morrisondistrict.court.gov. Mailed to judge.morrisondistrict.court.gov. Subject, re. No subject. My hand trembled as I clicked it open. The email was short, just one line. Can I talk to you? I read it 3 times. 4. Searching for some hidden meaning, some tone I might be missing. It wasn't formal, wasn't cold, wasn't a threat or a condemnation. It was a question. Can I talk to you? Not, we need to discuss your inappropriate communication. Not, I need to speak with you about professional boundaries. Just, can I talk to you? My heart was doing something complicated in my chest, something that felt like hope and terror mixed together until I couldn't tell them apart. I should have waited, should have thought it through, drafted a careful response, maybe consulted with Sarah first. But my fingers were already typing before my brain could catch up. Yes. When? I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then immediately regretted it, because yes was too eager, and when was too available, and I should have played it cool, should have pretended I wasn't sitting here in my dark office obsessing over every word she'd written. The response came back in less than a minute. Tomorrow, there's a coffee shop on 3rd Street near the river, away from downtown. 4 p.m., away from downtown, away from the courthouse, from her chambers, from anywhere someone might see us. My pulse jumped. I'll be there, I typed back. Then I sat there in the dim light of my office, staring at the exchange, wondering what I'd just agreed to, wondering if I was about to be let down gently, told in person why this could never be anything, why I needed to forget everything I felt, or wondering if, maybe, just maybe, I'd been right about those looks, about the way the air seemed to change when we were alone in the courtroom during recesses, about that last day when she'd looked at me and something in her careful composure had cracked, just for a second. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, pressing my palms against my eyes. Tomorrow. I had until tomorrow to prepare myself for whatever came next, to build up whatever defenses I could against the disappointment, the rejection, the reality that sometimes the things you want most are the things you can never have. But a small voice in the back of my head whispered something different, whispered that maybe she wouldn't have asked to see me in person if it was just to shut me down. That maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one who'd spent 6 months pretending. I grabbed my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. Me, Sarah, emergency. You're not going to believe what I just did. Sarah. Oh God, what now? Me. I sent it to her. Sarah. Sent what to who? Me. The email. All of it. The judge. I sent the whole confession to the actual judge instead of you. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then my phone rang. You did what? Sarah's voice was half screech, half laugh. I know. I'm the worst attorney in history. I should turn in my license now. Okay, back up. Start from the beginning. What exactly did you say in this email? I told her everything, my face burning even though she couldn't see me. Told her about the 6 months of tension, about the final hearing, about how I'd been drafting this long, pathetic confession all evening, meaning to send it to her so I could finally get it out of my system. And then I just sent it to her, to Judge Morrison. My finger clicked send, and my entire brain shut down, and by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. Holy shit, Sarah breathed. That's actually kind of romantic, in a completely mortifying way. There's nothing romantic about professional suicide, Sarah. But wait, what did she say? She asked if she could talk to me. Tomorrow, at a coffee shop nowhere near the courthouse. Silence on the other end. Then, Lena, she wants to meet you, away from work. That's not a, let me tell you why this is inappropriate meeting. That's a, don't. I cut her off. Don't get my hopes up. She probably just wants to handle this privately before deciding whether to report me. Or, Sarah said slowly, she's been feeling the same thing and you just gave her permission to finally say something. My stomach did that flipping thing again. That's not possible. Why not? You said there was something there. You said you saw it in the way she looked at you. I was probably imagining it, projecting, seeing what I wanted to see because I was so far gone I couldn't think straight anymore. Literally couldn't think straight. Sarah laughed at my terrible joke. So what are you going to wear tomorrow? I'm not thinking about what to wear. I'm thinking about damage control. Lena, listen to me. If she wanted to shut you down, she would have done it in the email. She wouldn't ask to meet you in person at some out-of-the-way coffee shop. She would have sent you something formal, something that established boundaries. Instead, she asked if she could talk to you. Talk. Not lecture, not reprimand, not discuss. Talk. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But I'd spent the last 6 months training myself not to hope, not to imagine, not to let myself think that maybe the way I felt wasn't completely one-sided. Sometimes I'd catch myself in these moments during hearings where I'd notice something. The way her eyes would linger on me just a fraction too long when I was arguing a point. The way she'd take a breath before responding to my objections, like she was steadying herself. That time I'd dropped my pen and she'd noticed immediately, even though she was reviewing documents and shouldn't have been paying attention to me at all. Those tiny things I'd collected like precious artifacts, examining them late at night, trying to decide if they meant something or if I was just desperate. I don't know what to think anymore, I admitted. Then don't think. Just go tomorrow and listen. Let her talk. Whatever happens, at least you'll know. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering. After I hung up with Sarah, I sat in my office for another hour, unable to make myself leave. The building got quieter. The cleaning crew moved to another floor. Outside, the city continued its normal rhythm. People heading to bars, to dates, to their lives, completely unaware that my entire world had tilted on its axis. Was it even possible that she felt the same way? That all those moments I'd been analyzing weren't just in my head? I thought about the way she'd look at me sometimes, when she thought I wasn't paying attention. How once, during a recess, we'd been the only two left in the courtroom, and she'd asked me about a detail from my argument, but it felt like she was asking just to keep talking to me. How her voice had softened, become less formal, and how quickly she'd caught herself and put the professional mask back on. Or maybe I was doing it again, reading too much into nothing because I wanted so badly for it to be something. I opened my laptop one more time, pulling up the email I'd sent, reading it again with different eyes, trying to see it the way she might have seen it, not as a disaster, but as something else, as honesty, as courage, even if it was accidental courage. I think about that last hearing, I'd written, the way you looked at me when I was finishing my closing argument, like you were seeing me, not just the attorney in the suit making legal points, but actually me. And I had to look away because if I didn't, if I let myself hold that gaze for one more second, everyone in that room would have known exactly what I was feeling. Had she felt it too? That electric moment where everything else fell away, and it was just the two of us, connected by something I couldn't name. Or was it all in my head? A fantasy I'd built up to make sense of the way my heart raced every time I was near her. Tomorrow, I'd find out. Tomorrow, I'd sit across from Catherine Morrison in a coffee shop where no one knew us, where we weren't attorney and judge, where all the rules that had kept us apart for 6 months no longer applied. And either she'd tell me gently that I'd misread everything, that she was flattered but this could never happen, or she'd tell me something else entirely. I closed my laptop, gathered my things, and finally left my office. The night air was cool against my face as I walked to my car. Above me, the stars were hidden by city lights, but I looked up anyway. You know when you do something so monumentally stupid that you can't even process it? When your brain just kind of shuts down and refuses to believe what just happened? That was me, driving home through familiar streets, replaying everything in my head until it stopped feeling real, until it felt like something that happened to someone else. Some character in a story I was watching from a distance. But it wasn't a story. It was my life. And tomorrow I had to walk into that coffee shop and face the consequences of my accidental honesty. Tomorrow I had to look Catherine Morrison in the eyes without the protection of a courtroom, without professional distance, without any of the armor I'd been wearing for 6 months. Tomorrow everything would change, one way or another. I just had to survive until 4 o'clock. When I got home, My apartment felt too quiet, too empty. I made tea I didn't drink, turned on the TV I didn't watch, tried to read a book I couldn't focus on, finally gave up and just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning through every possible scenario of what tomorrow might bring. My phone lit up with a text from Sarah. "Get some sleep. Whatever happens tomorrow, you'll handle it. You're brave, even if you don't feel like it right now." I typed back, "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. Brave people are always terrified. That's what makes it brave." I set my phone down and closed my eyes, but sleep was impossible. All I could see was Catherine Morrison, the way she looked in her black robes, commanding the courtroom with quiet authority, the way she'd look tomorrow, without those robes, without that distance, just a woman meeting another woman for coffee. "Can I talk to you?" 4 words that had given me hope and terror in equal measure. 4 words I'd be analyzing until the moment I saw her again. I pulled my blanket tighter around me, listening to the sounds of my building settling, of cars passing on the street below, of the city breathing around me. Somewhere out there, she was probably in her own home, her own bed, maybe thinking about tomorrow too. Or maybe not. Maybe I was the only one losing sleep over this. Maybe for her it was simple, just a conversation she needed to have, a situation she needed to address. Maybe I was building this up into something bigger than it was because I wanted so badly for it to mean something. But that email, "Can I talk to you?" There was something in those words. Something that felt personal, not professional. Something that made my heart beat faster every time I thought about it. I turned over, pressing my face into my pillow. Tomorrow. Just had to make it until tomorrow. And then I'd know. If this video reached you, it's because something in it is meant for you. Leave your like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now let's continue the story. And afterward, tell me which part was meant for you. The next day crawled by with the speed of continental drift. I tried to work, tried to focus on the brief I was supposed to be writing for a different case, but the words on the screen kept blurring together. I checked the clock every 5 minutes. 10:23 a.m., 10:29 a.m., 10:31 a.m. Sarah called at lunch. "Have you eaten anything?" "No, Lena, I can't. My stomach's in knots. If I eat anything, I'll just throw it up." "Okay, but you need to at least drink some water. I'm not having you pass out in the middle of this conversation because you're dehydrated and haven't eaten." I forced down some water and half a granola bar, which sat in my stomach like concrete. At 2 p.m. I left the office, telling my assistant I had a personal appointment. She looked at me strangely, probably because I was pale and shaky, but didn't ask questions. I drove to 3rd Street too early, parking 3 blocks away from the coffee shop because I couldn't make myself go in yet. Sat in my car watching the minutes tick by on my dashboard. 3:47, 3:51, 3:55. At 3:58, I got out of the car and walked toward the coffee shop. It was a small place, tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. The kind of neighborhood spot that probably got most of its business from locals. Not the kind of place where lawyers and judges typically gathered. Not the kind of place where anyone would recognize us. I pushed open the door at exactly 4 p.m. A bell chimed overhead. The smell of fresh coffee and vanilla hit me immediately. The space was cozy, with mismatched furniture and art from local artists on the walls. A few people sat scattered throughout, typing on laptops or reading. And there, in the back corner, partially hidden behind a potted plant, was Catherine Morrison. She was wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her eyes look even greener than I remembered. Her dark hair was down, falling past her shoulders instead of pulled back in the neat bun she always wore in court. She looked younger, less formal, more human. She looked beautiful. Our eyes met across the coffee shop, and my feet forgot how to work properly. I somehow managed to walk to her table without tripping, my heart hammering so hard I was sure she could hear it. "Hi," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I intended. "Hi." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please, sit. I ordered you a coffee. I remembered you always had one before hearings. Colombian blend, right? With 1 sugar?" I stared at her. She'd noticed what coffee I drank. Had remembered. That's perfect. Thank you." I sat down, wrapping my hands around the warm cup, even though I wasn't sure I could drink it without spilling everywhere. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Really looked, without the constraints of a courtroom, without having to pretend. This close, I could see the small scar above her left eyebrow, the flecks of gold in her green eyes, the tiny lines at the corners of her mouth that suggested she smiled more often than her courtroom demeanor would indicate. "So," she started, then stopped, took a breath. "I want to start by saying that your email, it was the bravest thing I've read in a long time." My breath caught. "Brave? I accidentally sent you my most pathetic moment. That's not brave, that's just mortifying." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Accidental honesty is still honesty. And you said things I needed to hear." My pulse jumped. "What do you mean?" She looked down at her own coffee, running her finger along the rim of the cup. When she looked back up, there was something vulnerable in her eyes, something I'd never seen before. "Lena, do you have any idea how hard those 6 months were for me? I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could barely process what she was saying. Every Tuesday and Thursday," she continued, her voice quieter now, "you'd walk into my courtroom, and I'd have to force myself not to watch you, not to notice the way you tucked your hair behind your ear when you were nervous, not to smile when you'd get so passionate about a point that you'd forget to keep your voice level. I had to be twice as strict, twice as formal, because I was terrified someone would notice, would see the way I felt about you. You felt." I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't make myself believe what I was hearing. "From the first day," she said, "you walked in for that initial hearing and you were so nervous. Your hands were shaking when you opened your files. But then you started talking, and you were brilliant, sharp and compassionate, and so earnest about your client's case. And I remember thinking, oh no, because I knew right then that you were going to be a problem." A laugh escaped me, half sob, half disbelief. "A problem? The best kind of problem." She reached across the table, and her hand hovered near mine for a moment before she pulled it back. "But you were an attorney with a case before me. I couldn't. There were rules, ethics, everything I've built my career on. So I forced myself to be professional, to be distant. Every single day I went home and told myself it was just 6 months. Just get through the case. And then what? And then I was too afraid to do anything about it." She laughed, but it sounded sad. "The case ended. You won, which I was happy about even though I couldn't show it. Your client deserved that outcome, and you fought brilliantly for them. And I thought, now I could reach out, send you an email, ask if you wanted to get coffee. But what if I was wrong? What if I'd been reading too much into every look, every moment? What if you were just being professional, and I was the one making it into something else? Catherine." I said her name without thinking, without the Judge Morrison I'd been trained to use. Her first name felt strange and intimate on my tongue. "I spent 6 months convinced I was imagining everything. You weren't imagining it." She said it firmly, like she needed me to believe it. "Every time you stood up to argue, I had to grip my pen tighter to stop myself from leaning forward. When you'd win a point and try not to smile, I wanted to smile back. That last hearing, when you were giving your closing argument, and when our eyes met, I forgot what I was going to say next," I admitted. "I just stood there like an idiot, because all I could think about was that you were looking at me like I was the only person in the room." "You were," she said softly. "In that moment, you absolutely were." The coffee shop felt smaller suddenly, the other people fading into background noise. There was just Catherine, looking at me with eyes that held everything I'd been feeling for 6 months, everything I'd thought was impossible. "I spent 2 weeks trying to figure out how to contact you," she continued. "Wrote a dozen emails I never sent. Looked you up on social media like a teenager. Drove past your office building twice just hoping I might accidentally run into you." "You did?" "Yes," which is pathetic, and probably crosses several ethical lines even though you're not my attorney anymore. "It's not pathetic." My voice was stronger now. "I did the same thing. I found excuses to walk past the courthouse. Went to that restaurant across the street hoping maybe you'd be there for lunch." She smiled, really smiled, and it transformed her face. Made her look less like the intimidating judge I'd been facing for 6 months, and more like a woman who was just as lost in this as I was. "And then I got your email," she said. "I was in my chambers working late, trying to distract myself from thinking about you for the 1,000th time that day. And there it was, everything I'd been feeling, everything I thought I was alone in feeling, laid out in your words. I almost died when I realized what I'd done. I confessed. I sat in my office for an hour having a complete meltdown. Sarah had to talk me off the ledge." "Sarah's your best friend?" "Yeah. She's been listening to me obsess about you for months. She's probably sick of hearing your name. Catherine laughed, and the sound did something to my chest, made it feel warm and tight at the same time. Well, please thank her for me, for not talking you out of sending that email. She didn't have the chance. I'd already sent it before I even realized what I'd done. Then thank fate, thank whatever made your finger slip, because that email gave me permission to finally admit something I've been too afraid to say. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I haven't stopped thinking about you, Lena. Not for 6 months, and I don't want to stop. The world tilted. Everything I'd been holding back, all the fear and doubt and desperate hope, came crashing over me at once. I don't want you to stop either. We sat there for a long moment, just looking at each other. The coffee shop continued around us. People came and went. The barista called out orders. But in our corner, time felt suspended, like we were in our own private world where nothing existed except the two of us, and this impossible thing growing between us. So what do we do now? I asked finally. Honestly, I have no idea. She smiled, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. This is new territory for me. I've dated, obviously, but nothing that started like this. Nothing that felt this complicated and this right at the same time. Tell me about it. I've never sent an accidental love letter to a judge before. Was it a love letter? She asked, and there was something careful in her voice, something hopeful. I took a breath. No more hiding. No more pretending. Yeah, I think it was. Her smile grew, soft and genuine. Good, because I've been wanting to write you one back. My heart stuttered. You have? Every day since the case ended. But I'm not as brave as you. I couldn't make myself take that risk. I didn't exactly take it on purpose. Sometimes the best risks are the ones we don't plan. She was right. If I'd thought about it, if I'd been careful and measured and professional like I always tried to be, I never would have sent that email. I would have kept everything locked inside, convinced it was safer that way, and Catherine would have done the same. We would have gone our separate ways, both of us carrying feelings we were too afraid to share. Instead, one mistake had changed everything. Can I ask you something? I said. That day, the last hearing, when you looked at me during my closing argument, what were you thinking? She was quiet for a moment, and I watched emotions flicker across her face. When she spoke, her voice was so soft I had to lean closer to hear her. I was thinking that in another life, in another context, I would already know what your hand feels like in mine. I was thinking that watching you be brilliant and passionate about your work was one of the most attractive things I'd ever experienced. I was thinking that in a few minutes the case would be over and I'd have no excuse to see you again. She paused. And I was thinking that I was going to lose you before I ever really had you. My throat felt tight. You're not going to lose me. How do you know? Because I've spent 6 months trying to talk myself out of how I feel, and it hasn't worked yet. I don't think it's going to start working now. Something in her expression softened. 6 months is a long time to hold something inside. Longer than I've ever held anything. Usually I'm terrible at keeping secrets. Ask Sarah. But this, I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk losing you before I even knew if there was a you to lose. There's a me, she said quietly. There's been a me this whole time. We talked for hours. The afternoon faded into evening, and the coffee shop got busier, then quieter again. We ordered more coffee, then switched to tea. Catherine told me about growing up in Oregon, about how she'd always wanted to be a lawyer, even though her parents pushed her toward medicine. How she'd worked twice as hard as everyone else in law school because she was a woman and because people constantly underestimated her. How becoming a judge had been her dream, but also meant living under constant scrutiny, always having to be perfect, never being able to just relax and be human. I told her about growing up in Texas, about coming out to my family when I was 22, and having half of them stop talking to me, about moving to this city to start over, to build a life where I could be myself, about the fear that still lived in my chest sometimes, the worry that people would judge me, would see my relationship choices as unprofessional or inappropriate. Is that why you didn't say anything? She asked. Because you were worried about how it would look? Partly, but also because you were my judge. I couldn't. There were so many reasons it was impossible. The case, the ethics, the power dynamic. And underneath all of that, the fear that maybe I was just projecting because I wanted so badly for someone like you to see someone like me. Someone like me? Accomplished. Brilliant. Completely out of my league. She laughed. Lena, have you looked in a mirror? You're the one who's out of my league. You're young and talented, and you have this energy about you that just lights up a room. I felt heat rise to my face. I'm not good with compliments. I noticed. You get that little crease between your eyebrows. She reached across the table, and this time she didn't pull back. Her finger gently smoothed the spot between my brows, and the touch sent electricity through my entire body. I inhaled sharply, and she pulled her hand back like she'd been burned. Sorry, I shouldn't have… No. I caught her hand before she could withdraw it completely. Don't apologize. I just wasn't expecting it. Her hand was warm in mine, strong. I could feel calluses on her palm, probably from some hobby I didn't know about yet. There was so much I didn't know about her, so much I wanted to learn. This is strange, she said softly, looking down at our hands. 6 months of being so careful not to touch, not even accidentally. And now it's okay. Is it? She looked up at me, and I saw the uncertainty there. We're still going to face questions. People are going to talk. Your colleagues, my colleagues. They're going to say things about why this happened, when it happened. They're going to assume. Let them assume. I said it more confidently than I felt. The case is over. We didn't do anything wrong. We waited. We followed every rule. And what happens next is between us, not them. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying. But so is the alternative. So is walking away from this because we're afraid of what people might say. She squeezed my hand gently. When did you get so brave? About 5 seconds ago. Ask me again in an hour and I'll probably be panicking. That made her laugh again, and I was starting to collect her laughs like treasures. Each one felt like a gift, like proof that beneath the formal exterior was someone warm and real. The coffee shop was mostly empty now. The barista was wiping down tables, giving us the occasional glance that suggested they'd like to close soon. Outside, the streetlights had come on, casting everything in a warm orange glow. I should probably let you go, Catherine said reluctantly. But I don't want to. Then don't. We both have work tomorrow. Real-life resumes. Real life can wait another hour. She smiled. Okay, another hour. We talked about smaller things then. Books we loved. Shows we binge-watched when we should be working. That terrible Italian restaurant downtown that somehow stays in business despite no one ever seeing customers inside. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, like we'd been doing this for years instead of hours. You know what's strange? I said at one point. For 6 months, I've been imagining what it would be like to have a real conversation with you. But every scenario I imagined was so much more awkward than this. What did you imagine? I don't know. That I'd be tongue-tied. That I'd say something stupid. That the reality wouldn't live up to the fantasy I'd built in my head. And does it? Live up to the fantasy? I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the way the dim light softened her features. At the small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. At the way she was looking at me like I was something precious and surprising. It's better, I said honestly, because you're real. You're not some perfect, untouchable figure. You're a person who gets nervous and writes emails she never sends, and drives past buildings hoping to run into someone. You make me sound like a stalker. You make yourself sound like someone who feels as intensely as I do. Something shifted in her expression, became more serious. I do feel intensely about you, Lena. That's what scared me so much. I'm not someone who does things halfway. When I feel something, I feel it completely. And I felt this thing with you from day one. And I knew if I acknowledged it, if I let myself explore it, there would be no going back. My heart was pounding. Is that what you want? No going back? I think that ship sailed the moment you sent me that email. She paused. Actually, no. That ship sailed the moment I opened it, and my first thought was relief. Not anger or concern about ethics. Just this overwhelming relief that I wasn't alone in this. The barista cleared their throat nearby, and we both jumped slightly, remembering where we were. We should probably actually leave, Catherine said apologetically, before they kick us out. Yeah, probably. But neither of us moved for a long moment. Just sat there, hands still clasped across the table, neither wanting to be the first to break the connection. Finally, Catherine stood, and I stood with her. We gathered our things, and she left a generous tip for the patient barista, who'd let us occupy the table for so long. Outside, the evening air was cool. The street was quiet, just the occasional car passing. We stood on the sidewalk, and suddenly I didn't know what came next. Was this good night? Was this the end of whatever this was? Where's your car? She asked. 3 blocks that way. I pointed down the street. I got here early and parked far away because I was nervous. I did the same thing. She pointed in the opposite direction. 2 blocks that way. We both laughed at the absurdity of it. 2 grown women, successful professionals, parking blocks away from a coffee shop because we were too nervous to arrive on time. "Can I walk you to your car?" she asked. "I'd like that." We started walking, and without discussing it, our hands found each other again. Catherine's fingers laced through mine, and the gesture felt both natural and momentous. We were holding hands on a public street, not hiding, not pretending. "Is this okay?" she asked quietly. "I don't want to assume it's more than okay." We walked slowly, neither of us in a hurry. The neighborhood was the kind where local restaurants and shops mixed with old apartment buildings. People passed us, but no one gave us a second glance. We were just 2 women walking together. Nothing remarkable, nothing scandalous. "I've thought about this," Catherine admitted. "What it would be like to walk with you, to not have to worry about who might see, to just be 2 people who are falling for each other." I stopped walking. We were under a streetlight, and I could see every detail of her face, the hope and fear mixed together in her expression, the way she was holding her breath, waiting for my response. "Are we?" I asked. "Falling for each other?" "I think I've been falling since that first hearing. I've just been too afraid to let myself land." Something inside me broke open. All the walls I'd been building for 6 months, all the carefully maintained distance, just crumbled away. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "I'm absolutely terrified because this feels huge, and I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to date someone like you, someone with your profile and your position. I don't know how to handle people judging us or making assumptions. I don't even know if I'm ready for something that feels this significant." "Okay," she said quietly. "Then we'll be terrified together." "That's it? Just, we'll be terrified together?" "That's it. We'll figure it out as we go. We'll take it slow. We'll be careful about work boundaries and professional appearances. But we'll do it together, instead of both being alone and miserable." She squeezed my hand. "Unless you don't want to. If this is too much, if you'd rather, I want to." I said it quickly before I could overthink it. "I want to so much it scares me. But yeah, let's be terrified together." She smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out. "Okay then." We started walking again, and my car came into view too soon. I didn't want this night to end. Didn't want to let go of her hand and drive home to my empty apartment and try to process everything that had happened. "So what happens now?" I asked as we reached my car. "Now you drive home safely. And tomorrow, if you want, you text me. And we figure out when we can see each other again. Tomorrow feels like forever away. Then text me tonight when you get home. Let me know you made it safely. You sound like my mom. I sound like someone who cares about you." She said it simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I turned to face her fully. We were close now, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something subtle and woody. Close enough that if I leaned forward just a little. "Can I started, then lost my nerve. "Can you what? Can I kiss you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her breath caught. For a moment she just looked at me, and I saw 1,000 emotions cross her face. Then, slowly, she nodded. I leaned in, closing the distance between us. Our lips met softly, carefully, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then Catherine's hand came up to cup my face, her thumb stroking my cheek, and I melted into her. The kiss deepened, became less careful, and more real. 6 months of wanting, of tension, of forced professionalism, all poured into this one moment. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. "I've been wanting to do that since the first time I saw you," Catherine murmured, her forehead resting against mine. "Really? Because you looked so serious that day, so intimidating." "That's because I was trying very hard not to look at you the way I wanted to." "And how was that?" "Like this." She pulled back just enough to look at me properly. "Like you're something amazing, something I never expected to find." My eyes stung with sudden tears. "You're going to make me cry in a parking lot." "Sorry. I'll save the devastating honesty for when you're somewhere more private." I laughed, wiping at my eyes. "God, what are you doing to me?" "Hopefully something good. Definitely something good. Terrifying and overwhelming and good." We stood there for a few more minutes, neither wanting to be the first to leave. Finally, Catherine stepped back, though her hand lingered on my arm. "You should go," she said softly, "before I convince myself to follow you home." Heat flooded through me at the image, but I forced myself to nod. "Text me, even if it's just to say goodnight." "I will." I got into my car, and she stood on the sidewalk watching as I started the engine. Through the window, I could see her smile, could see the way she wrapped her arms around herself like she was holding on to something precious. I drove home in a daze, the city passing by in a blur of lights and movement. My lips still tingled from that kiss. My hand still felt warm where hers had been. Everything felt surreal, like I'd stepped into an alternate universe where impossible things became possible. You know those moments in life where everything shifts? Where your before and after get divided by a single event? This was one of those moments. Before, I was someone who wanted something she couldn't have. After, I was someone who had it, who got to want it, who got to keep wanting it. When I got home, I texted her immediately. Made it home. Still can't believe today happened. Her response came almost instantly. It happened, and I'd very much like to do it again. Tomorrow? She sent back a smiley face emoji, which was so unexpectedly adorable that I laughed out loud in my quiet apartment. Tomorrow, my place? I'll cook dinner. You cook? I have many hidden talents. You'll discover them eventually. I flopped onto my couch, phone clutched to my chest, grinning like an idiot. Sarah called 10 seconds later. Tell me everything, she demanded, before I could even say hello. So I did. I told her about the coffee shop, about Catherine's jeans and down hair, about everything she'd said, about how we'd held hands, about that kiss in the parking lot that had made my knees weak. Oh my God, Lena, this is like a movie. It doesn't feel real yet, but it is real. This is really happening. Yeah, I smiled. It really is. So what's next? Besides dinner tomorrow night? I have no idea. We just take it one day at a time, I guess. Figure it out as we go. And the other stuff? The professional concerns? We'll deal with it. The case is over. We didn't do anything wrong. If people want to gossip, let them. I spent 6 months hiding how I felt. I'm done hiding. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm proud of you. You know that, right? For being brave enough to go after what you want. I accidentally sent an email to the wrong person. That's not exactly brave. But you showed up today. You sat across from her and had the hard conversation. You took the risk. That's brave, accident or not. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, processing everything. Today had started with terror, with the certainty that I'd destroyed any chance I might have had, and it had ended with possibility, with hope, with Catherine Morrison's phone number saved in my contacts and plans to see her again tomorrow. I thought about all the times over the past 6 months that I'd tried to talk myself out of how I felt. All the nights I'd lain awake, telling myself it was just infatuation, just proximity, just my imagination making something out of nothing. But it hadn't been nothing. It had been real. She'd felt it too. And somehow, despite all the obstacles, despite every logical reason why we shouldn't work, we'd found our way to each other. My phone buzzed with another text from Catherine. Can't stop thinking about tonight. About you. Me too. Get some sleep. You need to be coherent for work tomorrow. You too. Good night, Catherine. Good night, Lena. Sweet dreams. I drifted off to sleep with my phone in my hand, a smile on my face, and something warm and hopeful blooming in my chest, where fear and longing used to live. The next few weeks unfolded like a dream I was afraid to wake up from. Catherine and I saw each other as often as our schedules allowed. We discovered shared loves for old movies and terrible reality TV. We found that we could talk for hours about everything and nothing. We learned each other's rhythms and quirks and all the small details that make up a life. But underneath the happiness was always that awareness, the knowledge that people would talk, that our relationship, no matter how ethical its beginning, would be scrutinized, that in the legal community we both inhabited, we'd always be the attorney and the judge. 2 months in, we attended our first public event together. A bar association fundraiser where I knew half the attorneys and Catherine knew most of the judges. We'd discussed it beforehand, decided we were ready to be open about our relationship in professional settings. Still, my heart hammered as we walked in together, Catherine's hand resting lightly on the small of my back. The reactions were mixed. Some people seemed genuinely happy for us. Others raised eyebrows or exchanged knowing looks. A few older attorneys made pointed comments about maintaining appropriate boundaries within earshot, but Catherine handled it all with grace. When someone made a passive-aggressive comment about the complications of our relationship, she simply smiled and said, "The case ended before anything began. Ethics were maintained throughout, and our personal lives are exactly that. Personal." Later that night, back at her apartment, she was quieter than usual. "Are you okay?" I asked, sitting beside her on the couch. I'm fine. Just thinking. About? About whether this is fair to you. Whether being with me is worth dealing with all the judgment and speculation. I took her hand. Catherine, look at me. She did. You're worth it. This is worth it. I don't care what people say. I care about you. But your career? My career is fine. I'm a good attorney. My work speaks for itself. If people want to reduce me to the woman dating Judge Morrison, that's their problem, not mine. She pulled me close, burying her face in my hair. I love you, she whispered. The words hung in the air between us. Neither of us had said them yet, though I'd felt them for weeks. Months, maybe. I love you too, I whispered back. She pulled back to look at me, and there were tears in her eyes. Really, so much it terrifies me sometimes. Terrify me back, she said. Love me that much. So I kissed her, poured everything I felt into that kiss. All the fear and hope and overwhelming joy of having found her, of being found by her. As the weeks turned into months, we built something real, something solid. We had our first fight about something stupid and worked through it. We met each other's families, navigated those complicated dynamics together. We moved in together, merged our lives in that messy, beautiful way that happens when two people decide to share space and futures. And yes, people still talked. Some whispered about impropriety, even though there was none. Others questioned the timing, convinced we must have been involved during the case despite all evidence to the contrary. But we learned to live with it, learned that the opinions of others mattered far less than what we knew to be true, that our love, however unconventionally it began, was real and valid and worth fighting for. Because here's what I learned from all of this. Sometimes love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for the perfect moment or the ideal circumstances. It doesn't care about professional boundaries or what people might think. Sometimes love just happens, messily, inconveniently, in exactly the wrong place, at exactly the wrong time. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to let it, that impossible love becomes the most real thing in your life. A year after that first coffee shop meeting, Catherine proposed. Not in some grand public gesture, but at home on a Tuesday night after dinner. I don't want to wait anymore, she said, pulling out a simple gold ring. I want to marry you. Want to make this official and permanent in every possible way. Yes, I said without hesitation. Absolutely yes. We got married 6 months later on the waterfront where we'd had so many important conversations. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. When Catherine said her vows, when she promised to choose me every day, despite the complications and judgments and all the reasons people thought we shouldn't work, I understood something profound. Love isn't always the easy path. Sometimes it's the path that requires the most courage, the most faith, the most willingness to say, I don't care what anyone else thinks, this is what I want. And standing there with Catherine, promising forever despite everything, I knew I'd chosen right, knew that every moment of fear and uncertainty had been worth it to end up here. Because that's the thing about love, real love, the kind that starts with an accidentally sent email and becomes a life. It doesn't make sense on paper. It doesn't follow the rules. It just is. And if you're lucky enough to find it, brave enough to fight for it, you hold on tight and don't let go. Even when it's terrifying, especially when it's terrifying. Looking back now from the other side of all of it, I can see the thread that connects everything. That late night in my office, panicking over a sent email. Catherine's response. Can I talk to you? That first conversation in the coffee shop. The kiss in the parking lot. Every moment building on the last until we ended up here, married and building a life together. And I understand that sometimes the best things in life come from mistakes, from accidents that force us out of our carefully constructed plans and into something we never could have anticipated, something better than we dared to imagine. I accidentally sent that email. Catherine accidentally fell for the attorney in her courtroom. We both accidentally found exactly what we needed when we weren't even looking for it. And now we get to live this life we've built together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, choosing each other again and again, despite the fear and the uncertainty and all the voices telling us why we shouldn't. Because in the end, that's what love is. It's choosing someone. It's being brave enough to say, yes, this person, this relationship, this complicated, imperfect, beautiful thing. It's sending the email, even by accident. It's replying, can I talk to you? Instead of running away. It's showing up, being honest, taking the risk. It's terrifying and wonderful and worth every second. This is my story. The story of how one mistake changed my entire life. How an email sent to the wrong person led me to the right one. And if you're sitting there right now, wondering whether to take your own risk, let me tell you, do it. Send the email. Have the conversation. Take the chance. Because you never know. Maybe your mistake will be the beginning of something beautiful too. This channel, Loving Voices, exists to tell these stories. Stories of women finding love in unexpected places. Stories of courage and fear and hope. And all the messy, beautiful reality of loving another woman in a world that doesn't always make it easy. If this story moved you, if it made you feel seen or hopeful or less alone, please subscribe. Leave a comment sharing your own story. Hit that like button to help others find these stories too. Because every time someone engages, every time someone says, "Yes, this matters to me," we build something bigger. A community where women who love women can see themselves reflected, can believe that happy endings are possible. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that stories like mine, like yours, matter. Here's to accidental bravery, to wrong emails and right people, to love that finds a way.